February 28th, 2018. Neil lay his head on his pillow. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and shortly afterwards, he fell asleep in blissful peace. And that's how Neil fell asleep. That's my time. We have an education session to get to. Thank you. Now, to understand why this is significant, we need to rewind 2 years and learn the story of this person called Neil. Good afternoon, Toastmasters.
Good afternoon.
Neil had always been a bad sleeper. He snored very heavily. He shifted constantly in his sleep, and he was always disturbed. He had nightmares about his school life, about his poor relationship with his father, and about his feelings of inadequacy. And because of that, his sleep was always bad. And this was never more true than in 2015 and 16, when he was 23 years old. That was the worst year of his life. I want to break up, his girlfriend had told him, not looking at him. I think I'm done. This came 2 months after Neil had started living alone. That night, he went home to his one-bedroom apartment and he cried. At the turn of the new year, I met Neil for the first time. We started writing letters to each other, and that's how I came to know his story. It was one of the many projects that Neil started. He thought to himself, new year, new me. And there were 2 projects that shone out in particular for him. One, that he started interviewing people. And 2, that he joined Toastmasters, or as his American friends would say, Toastmasters. So let's talk about the interviews first. Neil had a blog, and he thought, okay, how do I make sure that I'm putting out easy blog posts every week? So he said, okay, I'll interview people on chat message, and then I'll copy and paste it, and that's done. Easy work. And so he started doing that. And he started interviewing his friends, and he did it for 3 months. And then he burnt out and he stopped. But then, last year, 2017, he thought, why don't I start that again? And so he did. And he started interviewing his friends again. And one of his friends, named Piyush, got back to him on WhatsApp and sent him a chat. You made me introspect like never before. Joint hands emoji, joint hands emoji, joint hands emoji, 6 times. And another friend called Nisha wrote on Facebook, she typed out of the blue, this young man, my junior from college, contacted me and asked me if he could interview me. I was flabbergasted. Why me? I haven't achieved shit, I told him. He said, why not? And that's how this interview process began. It was heartwarming to say the least. Neil got this feedback and he thought, I think this is good. What I'm doing is good. Let's come back to Toastmasters. When Neil joined Toastmasters at the turn of the new year, he started delivering his speeches one by one, not at a breakneck speed, but constantly. And during this time, he met a wonderful person in Toastmasters, who's in this room, who said, can you mentor my speech? Your English is very good. You should write a book. And Neil thought, my English is good. And from there, his personal development began because he started to gain confidence. And he thought, never again will I look back. Neil is me. Neil is my alter ego. Some of you in Toastmasters might remember him as the showman, a character that I created. Neil represents my most emotional side. I mentioned earlier that we started writing letters to each other, and that's true because at that time I started a project called Letters to Myself, which were letters to Neil, my emotional and vulnerable self. I joined Toastmasters and I started interviewing him. And I've never looked back since. I recently had the opportunity to interview our very own president, Toastmaster Induja, which will be published in April. Thank you for sharing your story with me. But that brings me back to February 28, 2018. I hadn't been in touch with my Neil for a very long time. But that day he came back. The day before, I had conducted another audio interview. Instead of chat, I called someone and I recorded the call. And that morning, 28th, I was talking to my mother and I told her, listening to someone's story has so much more impact than reading it in chat. And I felt really, really grateful that people are sharing their story with me. I was so grateful, I was so full of love that morning that I called my father later and I told him I loved him. For the first time in 25 years. A big milestone just because I was grateful. But the day wasn't over. Midday, I went to the club that I coach, Toastmasters Cisco Expressions. I went there and I conducted a table topic session. A table topic session where 8 newbies broke their ice for the first time and spoke for the first time on stage. 8 new speakers. I encouraged them, I motivated them, I inspired them, and they were hanging on to my every word. After the meeting, they came and asked me for advice, and we got 5 new members in that club that day, because of which that club was revived. Grateful. Only because I was grateful. The rest of the day, February 28th, went by in a haze. I did some office work, I attended a meeting, I spoke to my father in the evening and he said, my day went really well because we talked in the morning. But I was in a daze until I lay down in bed. I closed my eyes and I reflected on the day. I took a deep breath and I reflected on the day and I fell asleep and there were no nightmares. The next morning when I woke up, these dark circles were a little lighter. The skin on my fingertips felt a little bit smoother and my chest felt a little bit unburdened. My knees are shaking today because this story matters so much to me. I don't know, this never usually happens. But that's the story of how Neil fell asleep. Thank you for listening.